The greatest manipulator never controls your mind. He convinces you to surrender it.
Stay until the end, and you'll recognize every hidden tactic before it controls you.
That's not what happened. You're overreacting. I never said that. You're twisting my words again. You've heard one of these before, maybe from someone who insists it's out of love. That's what makes it dangerous. No raised voice, no threat, no villain standing in the doorway, just a slow, quiet erosion of your own certainty. So gradual you mistake it for growing closer to someone instead of growing smaller in front of them. You keep waiting for it to turn into something you could point to, a slammed door, a raised voice, actual proof you could hand to someone else and say, "Look, this is what I mean." That moment never arrives, and its absence is the entire mechanism. The people who do this best never give you the receipt. How much of what you believe is actually yours? Which opinions did you reach on your own, and which ones were placed there, gently, by someone who needed someone else to believe them? Carl Jung never used the word manipulation the way we use it now. He wrote about complexes, about projections, about the unconscious drives moving through every relationship, whether anyone in the room admits it or not. He wasn't building a field guide for spotting manipulators. He was mapping the architecture of the human psyche, the instincts and inherited patterns that shape behavior long before logic even shows up. But underneath the modern language, gaslighting, love bombing, guilt tripping sits exactly the structure Jung spent a lifetime studying. And most manipulation isn't calculated. The people doing it rarely experience themselves as manipulators. They experience themselves as right, as wounded, as simply reacting to you. You're already making excuses for someone while you watch this. That reflex you just felt, the one that wants to defend someone before they've even been named, didn't come from nowhere. Somebody taught you that defending them was safer than questioning them. And that lesson stuck long after the person who taught it left the room. This isn't going to ask you to become suspicious of everyone in your life. It's going to ask you to notice that reflex the next time it fires, instead of obeying it automatically. By the end of this video, you'll recognize 7 signs, so ordinary, so embedded in relationships, families, and workplaces, that most people carry 2 or 3 of them for years without ever naming a single one. Let's start with the sign that makes every other sign possible. It starts small. A comment shaved down until it sounds reasonable. A memory gently corrected. A feeling redirected before you finished having it. Ask yourself when you last apologized for a reaction before you'd even worked out what caused it. Say something enough times in enough different rooms, and a person will eventually doubt the one instrument they were born trusting, their own perception. Think of the last time you talked yourself out of a feeling that turned out to be right. That unease in your stomach during a certain conversation, the thought you talk yourself out of before you finish thinking it, that isn't weakness. That's information, arriving from a part of the mind that has no interest in protecting anyone's feelings, including your own. Jung called this channel intuition, one of the mind's core functions, a direct line to material the conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. Manipulation works by convincing you the channel is broken, not all at once, one overruled hunch at a time, until overruling yourself starts to feel like maturity instead of surrender. Not through cruelty, cruelty would get noticed. Through repetition, through small, plausible corrections delivered calmly enough that questioning them starts to feel unreasonable. Picture the partner who insists every single time that a conversation happened differently than you remember it, until you start narrating your own life in your head just to prove yourself right, rehearsing the play-by-play like you're building a case file for something you shouldn't have to prove at all. There's a difference between healthy doubt, the kind that makes you double-check a fact, and this kind, the kind that makes you doubt the checking itself. Healthy doubt resolves. This kind never does. because resolution was never the point. Compliance was. None of this requires a mastermind. It only requires someone who has learned that your self-doubt is more convenient than their accountability. And once that channel goes quiet, once you stop trusting your own read on a room, a relationship, a memory, you stop being a person with instincts. You become a person who needs to be told what's true. And someone is always available to do the telling, which is exactly the condition the next pattern feeds on. Jung gave a name to the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at directly. The shadow. Not a demon crouched in the basement of the mind, just everything the conscious self decided doesn't belong to its own image. The jealousy, the pettiness, the hunger for control dressed up as concern. The shadow doesn't vanish because it's unwelcome. It goes underground. And from underground, it looks for an exit. The easiest exit is someone else's face. This is projection. Taking a quality you cannot bear to own and finding it, with total conviction, in another person. It rarely feels like an accusation from the inside. It feels like an observation. Picture the partner who is quietly unfaithful and somehow ends up suspicious of your every text, checking your phone like the guilt in the room belongs to you. Every accusation lands like it's specifically about you, time-stamped, urgent, impossible to ignore, and you spend the whole evening defending a version of yourself that was never actually in question, while the real infidelity sits untouched 2 feet away. Notice the pattern underneath the pattern. The trait named is often real. It just belongs to the one naming it. And here's what makes it so disorienting to live through. The accusation usually carries a fragment of truth, just enough to send you looking inward. Was I distant? Was I too sensitive? Maybe they have a point. You end up investigating a flaw that was never yours to begin with, while the actual source of it stands across the room from you, completely unexamined. This is why projection is so exhausting to be near. It doesn't just accuse you, it recruits you into hunting for a flaw that isn't there, while the real issue goes unspoken by the one person capable of naming it. Jung believed that whatever we refuse to see in ourselves, we're condemned to meet in the world outside us, surfacing again and again in the people who seem to provoke us the most, which means the people projecting onto you rarely experience themselves as villains. They're simply unwilling to look inward, so they hand you a mirror and insist it's a window. You can spend years trying to fix a flaw that was never yours, polishing a reflection that was never actually your face. Meanwhile, the person who needed you distracted gets exactly what they needed. More time unexamined, and you get exhausted. And once someone has cast you as the place they dump what they refuse to own, they need you to keep performing a very specific role. That role has terms. Sooner or later, those terms get enforced. Jung used the word persona to describe the mask, the face you show the world, the role required to function inside a family, a career, a society. Everyone wears one. That alone isn't dishonest, it's necessary. The danger was never having a persona. The danger, Jung warned, is forgetting you're wearing one. Manipulative relationships thrive on exactly that forgetting, because they only ever reward one version of you, the agreeable version, the high-performing version, the one who doesn't ask for much and never causes a scene. Say yes, and you're met with warmth. Set a boundary, express a need, disagree even once, and the temperature drops. Not always with anger, sometimes with something quieter and more effective, withdrawal, a long, meaningful silence. You learn the lesson fast because the nervous system is an efficient student. Perform the mask and you're loved. Drop it and you're managed. You've watched it happen in real time. The same joke landing warmly on a good day and coldly on a bad one. Nothing about the joke changed. Only the mood in the room did, and somehow you were the one who adjusted. You know exactly which version of you gets rewarded. You've been performing it so long, you forgot it was a performance. Jung warned that identifying too completely with the persona, mistaking the mask for the whole self, leaves a person feeling hollow even when their life, from the outside, looks entirely fine. Picture the family role assigned to you before you were old enough to object. The strong one, the easy one, the one who holds everyone else together, whether or not anyone ever asked if you wanted the job. Nobody sat you down and offered you the role. You just noticed one ordinary day that it was already yours and had been for years. The people who benefit from that mask have very little incentive to meet the person underneath it, because the person underneath it has needs, opinions, limits. I know that means something. The persona has none of those. That's exactly why it's easier to love. This is why the first honest sentence in a manipulative relationship tends to land like a small earthquake. I'm not okay with this. I need something different than what I've been giving. The mask has spoken out of character, and what happens next will tell you, more clearly than anything else, what the relationship was actually built on. Because once the mask cracks, they rarely try to understand what's underneath it. They aim for it instead. Manipulation rarely wins an argument. It doesn't need to. It only needs to find the fear sitting underneath the argument and press there instead. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, the old familiar hunger for approval, the reflex to avoid conflict at any cost, even the cost of yourself. You already know which fear is yours. Some part of you flickered the moment you read that sentence. You might be noticing a pattern in these patterns. That's because the shadow doesn't just explain what someone can't face in themselves. It tells them exactly where you're soft. These aren't weaknesses unique to a few unlucky people. They're close to universal, fault lines laid down early, long before anyone was old enough to question them. People skilled at exploiting this, and most of them arrived at the skill instinctively, not strategically, develop an uncanny sense for exactly where that fault line runs. They don't need to read your diary. They watch what makes you go quiet, what makes you apologize first before you've even worked out what you're apologizing for. And then, often without ever consciously naming what they're doing, they press there. Picture the single cold evening that says more than any argument could. The silence that makes you quietly rewrite your own position, just to close the gap, just to feel the temperature come back up. It rarely takes a raised voice. One flat sentence delivered once, and then silence doing the rest of the work for the next 3 days while you scramble to figure out what you did wrong this time. None of this requires cruelty in the way we usually picture it. It requires accuracy. And most people offering it don't experience themselves as cruel at all. They experience themselves as simply doing what works. What makes this pattern so hard to name, even for the person living inside it, is that giving in out of fear feels almost the same as agreeing. You didn't decide they were right. You decided the fear wasn't worth surviving again, and a person quietly managing their own fear in every interaction has very little energy left to notice they've started managing someone else's too. At some point, the line between your inner life and someone else's begins to dissolve. Not all at once, a degree at a time. Their anger becomes something you provoked. Their sadness becomes something you failed to prevent. Their happiness becomes a project you're responsible for maintaining, like a houseplant that will wilt the moment your attention drifts elsewhere. You start checking on it the way you'd check a plant for the first sign of drooping, constantly, quietly, before anyone has even asked you to. You're making me like this. Look what you made me do. If you actually loved me, you wouldn't upset me this way. Two inner lives tangled together so tightly that one person's mood sets the emotional weather for everyone around them, and everyone else quietly adjusts to fit the weather. You start reading a room before you enter it. You start rehearsing sentences to avoid a reaction before it happens. You start feeling responsible for a feeling that was never yours to carry and never within your power to control in the first place. Therapists have a word for this. You don't need the word. You've been living it. You could probably draw a map of their moods with your eyes closed. You'd struggle to draw one of your own. This costs more than it looks like, because Jung's entire model of psychological maturity, individuation, depends on the opposite of fusion. Individuation requires separation, not coldness, not distance for its own sake. A clear internal line between what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else. Without that line, there is no self left to individuate. There is only a nervous system on permanent standby, waiting to absorb whatever arrives next. This is why individuation isn't selfishness, whatever anyone tells you. It's the opposite of the fusion that's been quietly running your nervous system for years. Picture the parent who says, "You'll be the end of me," the moment a grown child finally sets a boundary, as if the boundary itself were the injury. Few of these people consciously know that this is what they're doing. Many were taught by someone else that this is simply what love or loyalty or professionalism requires. The effect lands the same way regardless. Every ounce of attention spent monitoring someone else's inner state is attention that cannot be spent building your own. And a person with no attention left for their own inner life doesn't just lose their peace. They start to lose their outline. Isolation has a reputation problem. Most people picture something dramatic, a partner cutting off your friends one by one, a group pulling someone away from their family. That version exists and it's real, but it isn't the version that catches most people. The far more common isolation never touches your contact list at all. It happens on the inside. No one drives you anywhere. You just quietly stop reaching for the door. You stop trusting your intuition, one overridden hunch at a time. You stop trusting your confidence, one mocked opinion at a time. You stop trusting your own values, one small compromise at a time, each one reasonable in isolation, catastrophic in total. None of them alone would ever be worth a fight. That's exactly why none of them ever get one. You lose track of your own inner voice because it's been redirected, corrected, or quietly punished so many times that it eventually stops volunteering an opinion at all. This doesn't happen in a single conversation. It happens the way a riverbed changes shape, not from one flood, but from thousands of ordinary days of water moving in the same direction until no one can point to the day it happened. People inside this pattern rarely notice it while it's happening, because any single moment is too small to register as harm on its own. Picture the hobby you quietly dropped because it was mocked once, just once, and somehow that was enough. You didn't decide to stop. You noticed months later that you hadn't picked it up in a while and couldn't quite remember why. Multiply that by years, and you get a person who, when finally asked what they actually want, goes strangely quiet. Not because they don't care, but because the part of them that used to answer that question hasn't been asked in a long while. This is the real cost sitting underneath every pattern already named. Not one dramatic loss, but a slow disconnection from the single relationship every other relationship depends on, the one you have with yourself. This is precisely the disconnection manipulation depends on to keep functioning. A person still in contact with their own inner voice is far harder to manage, which is exactly why the moment you start finding your way back to that voice, everything around you starts to shift, including how the people closest to you respond to it. Watch what happens the moment you stop being easy to manage. Individuation was, for Jung, the central task of an entire life. Not a phase to complete, not a technique to master. The whole point, becoming who you actually are instead of the person you were trained to perform. Nobody claps when this starts. That's usually the first sign it's real. Psychologically secure people tend to enjoy watching this happen in someone else. Growth in a friend, a partner, a child doesn't threaten them because their own sense of worth was never dependent on the other person staying small. But a manipulative pattern runs on the opposite fuel entirely. It requires your dependence. It requires the earlier version of you, the one still doubting her own perception, still checking himself for flaws that were never his, still managing someone else's emotional weather instead of tending to their own life. So when you begin to change, start therapy, start setting a boundary, start trusting the intuition you spent years being talked out of, watch closely what happens next. It rarely looks like celebration. More often, it looks like sudden, urgent concern. I'm just worried about you. You've changed. You used to be so much easier to talk to. Easier meaning smaller. Easier meaning quieter. Easier meaning available whenever they needed you to be. That last sentence is the most honest thing they will ever say to you. You have become harder to manage because managing you required a version of you that no longer exists. This resistance usually isn't evidence of a mastermind losing their grip. It's something closer to human, someone who's never done this work on themselves, unsettled by the sight of someone else finally doing it. Their discomfort is real. It's just not evidence that you're doing something wrong. And it's no longer your responsibility to absorb. The moment you begin to truly know yourself, uncomfortably, thoroughly, all the way down, is the moment manipulation starts running out of material to work with, because it was never really about you. It was always about a mind that hadn't yet learned to trust its own reflection. None of this is an invitation to suspicion. If you leave this video cataloging everyone in your life as a manipulator, you've missed the point and traded one kind of confinement for another that just feels more righteous. Most people who trigger these patterns aren't villains. They're repeating exactly what was modeled for them, often by someone who did the same thing to them first. And if you're honest with yourself, you might recognize a few of these patterns in your own hands too. That recognition isn't shame. It's the beginning of the work. It asks you to accept uncomfortable truths, even about the people you love most, especially about them. Jung's answer to everything named tonight was never armor, never suspicion, never a permanent, exhausting watchfulness aimed at other people's motives. His answer was self-knowledge. It starts with looking directly at the parts of yourself you'd rather leave in the dark. The envy, the pettiness, the anger you'd never admit to out loud. Not to indulge them, but to stop being quietly ruled by what you refuse to see in the mirror. It means noticing projection, the kind aimed at you, and the kind you aim outward without realizing it. The person who irritates you far more than the situation justifies is often showing you something about yourself worth a second look. It means building a quiet internal compass instead of borrowing everyone else's, checking in with yourself before you check in with the room, a confidence that doesn't need anyone's permission to stand. Not arrogance, just a place inside you that decides what's true without waiting for someone else's approval first. And it culminates in something Jung considered genuinely rare: conscious relationships. Not two masks negotiating terms with each other, but two whole people, capable of real closeness, precisely because neither one needs the other to stay small to feel secure. That's rarer than it sounds. Most relationships run on some quiet, unspoken agreement about who gets to stay big and who has to stay small. This isn't a call to become unreachable or endlessly guarded. It's a call to become someone whose sense of reality no longer needs anyone else's permission to exist. Every pattern named tonight requires one ingredient above all the others: a mind willing to doubt itself first and the other person second. Take that ingredient away and the whole thing falls apart. Not through willpower, through simply refusing to hand over the doubt in the first place. Not because you've built higher walls, because you no longer need them. The strongest walls were never meant to surround your life. They were meant to be built inside your mind. And the moment you truly know yourself, no one else gets to write your story.
Freedom begins the moment you stop living through someone else's mind.
If this changed how you see people, subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts below.